Hello, dickheads. Good to be back. This is our third episode in a row on the Knights of the Round Table. It's pretty good. One a week for the past three. 2 weeks from now, though, I promise we're gonna have a real episode. Full, brand new episode. Yes. And guess what? I'll even give you an episode next week, too. So that'll be 5 episodes in a row after it's all done and said and done. Next week's gonna be a rerun, just because the episode I'm doing has something to do with that. So we're just gonna do like a replay. If you already listened to it, skip it. I don't care. It's gonna be great. But on to today. And before I get started about today's night, I have to tell you about the lie I told you during the Sir Brandelis episode. And I know I say this every episode, but we got to say it. If this is the first night episode that you're doing, one of my Knights of the Round Table episodes, you should probably go back and start from the start. Start from the Private Dick's proper episode about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. There's actually two of those episodes. And then start to listen to side quests from there. And during these episodes, as a fun thing, I decided I was going to make up stories about these knights in each of the episodes in hopes that my made up story somehow makes it into the official canon for that night. To be honest, which I haven't said in many of these preambles, is that some of these knights don't really have much on the internet about them. I'm sure if I got right into getting into Arthurian history in the universities, I would and read like Vulgate cycle and all that stuff. I'm sure there's lots of stories about all these knights, but I'm just skimming the internet here. So I have to make shit up just to keep it interesting, just to keep it fun. You know what I mean? But the ultimate goal is to get these lies into something official. Someone else mentions it somewhere else. That'll make me happy. What I typically do for these episodes, I tell you what, most of what I find out during a week of research, and the rest I just kind of make up. So I tell you a lie. So what? And I don't tell you until next episode what the lie is. So that's why we're going back to last week's episode with Sir Brandelis. I told you about how his whole family was killed by Sir Gawain after Gawain was hitting on his sister Gillerette. His whole family was killed by Gawain. That was true. That wasn't the lie. And he did have to stop fighting with Gawain because of Arthur's orders. If you go back and listen, you'll hear Arthur stop the fight. That's true as well. But all the details that went around that event, where they fought and they had that big long battle, and I said ching chang chong as like a fighting sounds for whatever reason. All the dramatic bullshit and Arthur demanding them stop. That part was made up. That was made up part. They don't really have a full story on the internet. It's just like Arthur separates them. So I just added a whole story for it. We're in the Studillion cycle, boys and girls. What I'm telling you is the truth, actually. I shouldn't say this lies. This is the truth now. Also, in the last episode, I talked about our subject today. The only other brother of Brandalis that survived, a guy named Sir Meliant. So let's get into him.
An elite team of private detectives.
What if balloons are aliens? Maybe that's the key component we're missing.
Cover-ups.
John's guilty.
Mysteries that need to be solved.
Maybe Mormons need mountains.
Richard, shut up.
If I'm going to be honest about this whole thing, there's about 4 or 5 different versions of Meliant throughout the different Arthurian cycles. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. This is the Studillion cycle. So I'm just going to put all the best stories together, making into one super duper Meliant, one super mutant Meliant. So here we go. Sir Meliant was the youngest of King Norris de Lee, the nephew of King Badge Magus of Gore. And if you remember the last episode, we talked about Meliant's dad, his uncles Terry and Guymore, and brother Brandelis went to fight Gawain for the honor of Gillerette, Meliant's sister. In some stories, I found out as I as I dug a little different here. Some stories, Gawain doesn't just like hit on her; he rapes her. It's Gawain's a rapist too. We've got Arthur being a rapist and Gawain. In the more calm stories, Gawain just tries to seduce Gillerette. So let's be real here. I feel like the only one of those stories would make King Norris and his fam go after revenge. It wouldn't be like he hitting on her. I think the rape is probably the more accurate story. Doesn't really matter in the end though, because Norris, Terry, and Guymore all die. Gawain fucks them right up. And there's a different Meliant who Lancelot kills his father, but Meliant was the son of the Lord of Waste Manor in that story, which is basically a haunted manor in Camelot. The story sounds more fun than it is, though, because it's not really. I don't like that story. Honestly, it's just kind of boring. Like, I don't like the Waste Manor. It's boring. There's nothing to it. So we're gonna Studilian cycle. We're sticking with the Gawain kills Nora's and for on his revenge mission. Nora's killed by the man whore and now rapist Gawain. Like I said, Brandelis had to give up the fight and he escapes with his life. But where does that leave little Melian? Melian probably wanted to go and try to kill Gawain with the men of his family, but he was a 10-year-old when all that happened. So after Gawain kills the family, he kind of goes and picks up Melian and he drops him off with Sir Tybolt of Tintagel. And Tintagel, if you remember, is where Arthur grew up. So Thibaut, Sir Thibaut, was an elder guy who was friends with Arthur. I guess all the knights of the Round Table. I don't really know why he didn't go to live with King Badge Magus of Gore, or why he didn't go up there. And I'm not really sure too much about Sir Thibaut's early life, but he seems like a good dude. He took in Meliant. Thibaut had a few daughters, which I find he named them amazingly. Obi and Obi-Lot. Not just, well, you could vary it up a bit. One could be Obi, the other one could be Catherine. Why do they have to have the same name? Meliant grew up around these girls, and they're both around his age. Obi was the oldest and closer to Meliant's age. Obi-Lot was a little bit younger, but still hung around. Meliant falls in love with Obi through his early teenage years, but she didn't like him. She outsider orphan boy, really. I don't know if it was that, but she just didn't like him. She rejected him hard. She rejected him all the time. So when Meliant reaches the age of knighthood, he challenges his keeper, Sir Thibaut, to put on a tournament for the hand of his daughter in marriage. Thibaut agrees, and Obi is just an object again, just like every woman in every Arthurian tale. No personality, just an object to be won, not people. Meliant trains hard and hard, but guess who shows up at the tournament? Fucking man whore Gawain. They joust. Gawain unhorses Meliant easily, and he wins the tournament. Meliant knew his father was killed in battle, but didn't know it was Gawain who did the deed. I feel like if Meliant knew that Gawain was the murderer of his entire family, he may have won that joust. And later he does find out about Manhor Gawain being a menace who killed his family and fucking goes wild. So I know that he didn't know, and I think that was to protect the image of the Knights of the Round Table. A lot of these guys were terrible ass people, but I don't know if that was being talked about as much. Like Arthur the Lesser was son of Arthur who raped his mother. I don't think that story was told. It was more like the sword and the stone got pulled up by Arthur, or like Gawain raped Gilorette. I don't think any of that stuff was like. I think they're propagandized into better people than they were during that time. We'll talk a little bit more about how when Gawain finds out, or sorry, when Melian finds out Gawain killed his family. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So after the joust is over and the battle's done, Thibaut lets Gawain do what he wants with Meliant. Everyone thought that meant that Gawain was going to kill Meliant, execute him, but that's not what he did at all. Gawain decides to take Meliant captive, and very soon afterwards, Gawain gives his new captor to Obi's little sister, Thibaut's youngest daughter, Obilot. She wanted to have Meliant as a slave boy for a few days. That was her thing. I want to have a slave. She got him to do all of her chores around the castle. She made him go on a date with him for a ball they were having for little tweens. She would have been 12. He would have been like 19, 18, 19. Obilot was kind of in love with Meliant, but she was still 12. She was 12 at the time. Meliant was not interested in her. The classic, he's more interested in Obi, not the young sister. But during his time as a captor, he used it wisely. He started to reconcile with Sir Thibaut. And over time, he gained his trust back, and Thibaut ends up taking away his daughter's toy and lets Meliant leave. And Meliant doesn't really have a place to go. He only knows one relative of his that he was told about. Brandelis was still alive and kicking somewhere, but I'm not even sure he knew about him. When he left for Tintagel, he was just a little kid. He was probably 5, 4. And Tebow did let him know about his uncle in Gore, Badge Magus. So that's where he decides to go. Meliant heads to see his uncle in Gore, Badge Magus. Badge Magus was the king of Gore, actually. And Badge Magus is another knight in his own right, and will probably get his own full episode. Just know that Meliant went to Gore to see his uncle. While there, Meliant decides to squire up with Badge Magus. Meliant's still young and inexperienced, and being a knight was very important to him. And what a better place to squire, and what a better person to be a squire to than a fucking king of Gore. King of Gore. That shit sounds badass. That shit sounds wicked, being the king of Gore. As a squire, Badge Magus takes Meliant on the Grail quest. And like I said, I'm going to talk about the Grail quest more later, but I do want to tell you this. During the Grail quest, Meliant abandons his uncle for Galahad at the White Abbey. What's the White Abbey? I'm not sure yet. I haven't done the research on that, on the quest for the Holy Grail yet, but I know during that episode I will bring it up. I've already made notes. After the quest for the Grail is when Melian is finally anointed as a Knight of the Round Table. With his appointment into the Knights, Melian became and this they said this in many different things. He became the seventh best fighter in Arthur's court. Seventh. Seventh to me is very specific, but that's apparently where he stood. Seven. Not an all-star, better than most. I guess he must have trained pretty hard during the Grail quest because when he got with his uncle, he was still a kid. Now he's an upper mid-level knight. Meliant was one of the only knights to have traversed the land of Sorlays via the North Welsh Bridge. The North Welsh Bridge, that's hard to say, North Welsh Bridge. The North Welsh, the North Welsh Bridge was also known as the Underwater Bridge and was one of the two bridges that connected Arthur's Britain and Galahaut's kingdom of Sorlois. Both bridges were dangerous. The North Welsh Bridge was submerged in parts and was defended at the Sorlois end by a strong tower and a stout knight. And I kept looking up this stout knight. I'm sorry, I can't figure out anything about him. Meatball the Knight. I hope that's true. The bridge itself was a foot and a half wide, like I said, partially underwater, and only 5 knights ever made it across alive: Gawain, Meliant, Yitter, Dodinel, and Arthur himself. Lancelot and Gawain almost drowned trying to cross when they did it before. Lancelot didn't even make it across. Gawain had to save him, and he didn't even make it. Gawain made it. So it's an impressive feat for him. During Arthur's time as king, he had to defend his realm against many rebels and rival kings. One of the guys that Arthur fought often was a guy named Brian of the Isles. He was constantly trying to usurp King Arthur and take his throne. One of the many battles they fought was called the Siege of Logres Castle. There isn't much detail about this siege, but I do know a few things. Sir Kay, Arthur's brother, kinda, I guess is like pseudo brother, is fighting with Brian against Arthur at this time. Now, I don't remember the Sir Kay episode having a Sir Brian in it, so maybe I missed that detail, and I'll probably go back to it later on at a certain point. Meliant, during the siege of Logres, is fighting alongside King Arthur, and Arthur is victorious during the siege. And after this battle, Meliant starts to bang Flory. Now, if you remember, Flory is Gawain's wife, and I love that. I don't know why I love that. I feel like he finally got his revenge on the raper, just banging his wife out, you know? Soon after, there's still warring Brian of the Isles and King Arthur. And one of the other battles that wasn't that far after the Siege of Logres, Meliant joins up with Brian and Kay to fight against Arthur in the Siege of Britain. Meliant leads this invasion, and Meliant dies during one of the battles in the invasion, the Battle of Pennevoiseuse. Lancelot had mortally wounded him when they faced off on the battlefield. This is before Lancelot and Arthur are at odds. They're still allies at this point. Meliant and Lancelot crossed swords for over an hour before Lancelot got his final blow in. Now, there is an alternative story to the death of Meliant. that he dies of old age. And this would be after joining Lancelot in the feud between Lancelot and Arthur for Guinevere's hand. And after the battle with Lancelot, Lancelot actually banished himself, and Meliant went back to France with Lancelot. And like, if you don't remember that, go back to the original Arthur story. Lancelot was exiled, became the Earl of, or sorry, Meliant was exiled with Lancelot, and Meliant became the Earl of Tersad. And to me, this story kind of sounds unreal considering he was just fighting for Brian and Sir Kay against Arthur. Lancelot and Arthur had their differences, but this was way after the Battle of Penwas. So why was he trying to fight against him at this time? Maybe he didn't. Maybe this is supposed to be after he joins up with Lancelot. This version of the story says that Meliant was captured during his first battle against Brian in the Siege of Logres. And this is when he's radicalized by Brian and Kay, saying when he joins up with them against Arthur. Meliant would have been easy to radicalize. Usually orphans are. Kay and Brian tell Meliant that the reason he was an orphan at a young age wasn't because his father and uncles and brothers were killed in some glorious battle, but rather murdered by Gawain. And as a child, had been told lies, so this makes it the reason he would have joined up against Arthur. So sometime after banging Flory, I'm guessing that maybe it would have been right before he bangs, maybe bangs Flory after he hears Gawain killed his family and then joins up with Arthur. Maybe whatever. So after reading the truth, Melian hated all the knights of the Round Table, including Gawain, anybody who supported the little raper. So he fought against Arthur in the Battle of Camlan. This time, however, he wasn't murdered like every other knight of the round by Lancelot because he was on Lancelot's team. Instead, like I said earlier, he was exiled with Lancelot and became some earl. And he lived to his old age, died a natural death. These are so rare in these stories. So it's quite refreshing to hear that he got to live a long life. Most of them die in battle in their 30s at their prime. And that's the story of Sir Melian. It's a story of a bunch of Sir Meliants mixed together, but it's a story of Sir Meliant and the Studio Alien cycle. I loved it. And I thank you, dickheads. I thank you guys for listening. We'll be back, like I said, next week with a rerun. And a week after that, brand new. I think you're all going to love the episode. Peace. Have a good night.
I just watched Private Dicks and I think RJ's the funniest.
What? Come on.